It is a truly beautiful day out. I'm looking outside the window right now, man, and the sun is coming down. The bushes, man, the greens of them are all looking phenomenal. It's like a picturesque moment right now, man. Apologies, I normally record these episodes on Fridays, but yesterday, the 24th of June, was such a busy day that I did not get an opportunity to get on here and put this out. I don't really talk about that the show is also on Spotify. I think a lot of people listen to this on YouTube, but you can listen to this on Spotify under the name Cinephoria. That is Cinephoria. That was originally how I had the show, but I know that people listen to some stuff on YouTube in the background, so it is there as well. Okay, last week we were talking about the 50th anniversary of Francis Coppola's The Godfather, and today we'll be discussing the 50th anniversary of Gerard Damiano's groundbreaking, controversial adult film Deep Throat. This has been a very talked about film, maybe the most famous adult film ever. I think that's a pretty fair assessment. Deep Throat was the film to break through strictly an audience that was primarily seeing adult films and into the mainstream. I mean, this is a very talked about film. Even if you have never seen the film, you know, everybody knows the term Deep Throat. Everybody knows the name from this film. And this was a film that the pre and post production are much more talked about than the film itself. The film itself, man, is rather unexceptional. It's a silly plot. Very the filmmaking is not up to snuff, so to speak. It's the camera work is nothing too exceptional. There are times where a problem that I have with some adult films is the camera is sometimes very stationary, and the editing can be very monotonous. Where you see so many adult films where the camera work is during the love sequences is it's nothing very spectacular. It's just plopped down and some various edits of reaction shots back to the same shot as before, and this is no exception here. Although there are times where Damiano's camera work at first is actually pretty interesting. There's the first sequence in the film between Dolly Sharp and another actor whose name I don't know. There it goes behind her, kind of like a POV shot. It's very interesting to start a film like that. But the film, it's like I said, it's nothing too exceptional. It's just a very silly kind of script, fronted by Linda Lovelace and Harry Reams. And the plot of the film is just that Linda Lovelace, she is somebody who is having trouble getting any sort of sexual satisfaction. She's tried. She is roommates with Dolly Sharp's character Helen, who is more promiscuous and is more sexually active. And she tries to talk to her about it, saying that. Also, I apologize if you hear a spoon. I have tea right here. I'm just waiting for it to settle. And a very nice cat mug with ears. It's very humorous. But Linda can't really. She can't get off sexually, so she goes to see a doctor. Man, Dr. Young, played by the great Harry Reams, one of possibly my favorite adult actor. I think we'll talk about Harry Reams in a bit, but I think Harry Reams, along with Robert Kerman or Arbola, are actors who I think are good actors outside of being good performers, which is something that I think people don't take into appreciation for. But we'll talk about Harry Reams in a little bit. But anyways, Linda goes to see Dr. Young, who discovers that, without being too graphic, I'll try to be as PG-13 as I can in this conversation, but the point of satisfaction that she wants to achieve is in the back of her throat, So, of course, she has to meet that satisfaction with Deep Throat. And from there, we get silly sequences. There are very silly moments. It's very cartoonish, but at the end of the day, you get about an hour of just various sexual escapades and discovering that she is a woman, discovering the sexual identity of herself. Identity being more so of her gratification. And yeah, the film is not, there's not much to talk about here. It's sort of just, in terms of the film itself, there are many sequences that are humorous and silly. The script is very comical, with a couple moments that are quite humorous. I really enjoyed the sequence when Linda first goes to see Harry Reams and he's playing it up, being very silly. He has a doctor, like a nurse who, I mean, he's a doctor as well, but like a nurse who, is taking notes for him in very humorous ways. The way the camera work kind of pulls back and we see what's going on. In that regard, I think that the camera work is actually not too bad. I think Gerard Damiano has very good comedic timing in terms of what to show and when. I'm just talking more so previously about the love scenes that aren't as exceptional. But Gerard Damiano is a very talented filmmaker. He, besides Deep Throat, I think he's most known for films like The Devil and Miss Jones, I can see Memories Within Miss Aggie. These are, I think The Devil and Miss Jones is, I can't speak. I'm getting Miss Aggie and Miss Jones mixed up. The Devil and Miss Jones, I think, really shows a different kind of filmmaking part of him that's darker, but also more true to his craft as a filmmaker. That film also has Harry Reams in it and has Georgina Spelvin. And some of his work has been released by Vinegar Syndrome. Memories Within Miss Aggie might be out of print now, but that was released on Blu-ray. He also did Let My Puppets Come, which is a very silly adult-themed puppet film that I own the Blu-ray, and it's actually a pretty humorous film. It's very silly and exceptional, but it's also a musical as well, which is very ambitious. And it's funny because I've only seen that film, I believe, once, and there's one song in there that still sticks with me. So it's very humorous that a silly musical like that can have such an effect that I still remember the song. I think there were a couple songs, but there was one main song that I still remember in it, which is very silly. But he also did what's that? The Story of Joanna, which I hadn't seen. But Damiano is a very interesting filmmaker. One thing that I really want to point out, which I think anybody who is interested in the history of adult cinema obviously is probably familiar with Ashley Young and the work that he's done with The Rialto Report. I mean, it's truly it's a show and a website that basically chronicles the history of adult cinema. It interviews a lot of adult actors, a lot of whom have passed away, and like Harry Reams has passed away, and there was a great interview when Robert Kerman passed away, talking about his adult career, and also Robert Kerman probably I would say is most well known for his role in Ruggero Deodato's Cannibal Holocaust. He also has a small role in Umberto Lenzi's Cannibal Ferox. But Kerman has been in films like Debbie Does Dallas and Anyone But My Husband, films of the such. But I'm going off topic here. The film itself, I'm not going to get like a big history lesson on Deep Throat because that could be a film in and of itself. And Linda Lovelace, I think, is such an interesting person. Her relationship with Chuck Traynor and her relationship with the film. Chuck Traynor was her manager / boyfriend who was very abusive to her. One of the big things with the film is that many times you can see visible bruises on her. Traynor was very possessive, and on set he was very intrusive. There are stories that Damiano would tell him kind of just go run errands to get him off the set because Linda was uncomfortable with him there. And I think that relationship there has definitely affected Linda's viewpoint, because Linda Lovelace very famously, she was very pro this film, and then at a certain point she got involved with the feminist crowd at the time, and who were taking a stance against pornography. So she, on the defense, was against the film for a while, and she was making a lot of statements that were just kind of mostly untrue, and mostly in terms of the amount of people who say that what she said wasn't true. She would say things like she was held at gunpoint on the set and nobody cared that she was being abused. And with interviews with a lot of people involved, with Harry Reams, with Damiano, people who knew them, a lot of that's just very untrue. And I think what it comes down to is that this is somebody, Linda Lovelace was somebody who was, I think, very easily persuaded to do a lot. There's a great interview on the Rialto Report of somebody who knew Lovelace later on in life and wrote a book about the experiences that, from what I've heard, is a very unbiased sort of view. It takes what Linda said and talks about what's true and what's not. It's a book I'm very interested in reading. While I'm talking, I'll try to find the name of it here. But I think it's just somebody who, when Deep Throat got as massive as it did, financially, it's one of the most profitable films of all time. I mean, it was, I don't know what the budget was, but it was a huge moneymaker, and it's a film that in terms of the mainstream, kind of broke through in terms of people like Johnny Carson and celebrities were openly going to see these. It wasn't a secret that a lot of people were going to see this film. It was a massive moneymaker. And I have the name of the book right here. The book that was discussed was The Complete Linda Lovelace by Eric Danville from 2013. And that's an interesting year as well, because I'll talk a little bit about the film Lovelace that came out that I'm kind of going off topic. Not off topic, but I know my thoughts are a little unfocused at the moment. But with the film, it got big. And then it all kind of came crashing down. Damiano and Harry Reams and everybody, they were brought to court, and Harry Reams was actually prosecuted for his role in the film. And he, mentions how ridiculous it was that I believe he was the only one who was prosecuted in the film. And I think that Lovelace kind of just got scared of a lot of the coverage. I am, a lot of them could never have anticipated that this would have been the film, the pornographic film, to break into the mainstream like it did. And in terms of just being a pop culture sort of phenomena in a way. And I think that just kind of scared Lovelace from what I've seen. I think that she was somebody who has a lot of regrets about her past in terms of how publicly it was known. Because while there are big adult film stars, I don't think there was any who kind of had the reputation that Lovelace had, because as famously as well, there was a loop that she did, and if you don't, and what a loop is essentially like a small reel of like footage you put money into, and you could watch a couple minutes at a time. But there's a loop of her with a dog that I know she's very Linda Lovelace is past, so I should say in past tense, but doesn't like to talk about, or didn't like to talk about, and I know that she was very that was another one where she said that she was like held at gunpoint, that Chuck Trainer forced her to do. And Trainer as well is a very interesting guy, because I think what's interesting is that after they had separated, Trainer would actually go on to manage and date probably the other big adult film star, Marilyn Chambers, who Marilyn Chambers is beautiful. I think she is just one of my favorite adult film stars, and probably most famously known for being in David Cronenberg's Rabid. And I remember the first time I actually saw Rabid, I didn't know that she was an adult film star. Looking up her work, she was probably most famously in stuff like Behind the Green Door. I apologize, and I'm thinking of Beyond the Door, the Italian Exorcist ripoff. And apparently, from what I've heard, Chambers never had any ill will with Trainer. They got along very well, and obviously, you could see Chuck Trainer's effect that he, had on Lovelace and Chambers, two of the biggest adult film stars ever. It's very interesting, and actually, at the time of recording this, the Rialto Report has put out part 2 of the Chuck Trainer episodes. I haven't listened to that yet, but yeah, he's a very interesting guy there, and that whole situation could be a whole conversation in and of itself. But what I was saying before about with Harry Reams, I think Harry Reams is one of these guys, one of these actors who I think like Jamie Gillis and actors of the such, who are actually legitimate actors as well, in terms of their talent. Because while Harry Ramis is and Jamie Gillis and Robert Kerman, they're all good performers and the such. Seeing work of them and seeing their, specifically Harry Ramis' charisma on screen, it really shows how he could have been in legit he could have been in legit films, because his comedic timing in this is very sharp. And early on, when Linda Lovelace goes to see him, he's acting very silly, but he's very funny. He's got this real charm and charisma that is really a big part of what helps out the film. Seeing him in other work is interesting as well. He did. I think probably most famously, he did Forced Entry, which is a roughie that I know he distanced himself from later on. And except, the Forced Entry is what it is. It's a very ridiculous kind of film. But I think what really kind of clicked for me with Reams is when I watched again Andy Milligan's Flesh Pot on 42nd Street. That's a film that, unfortunately, I think you can only get in the Severin box set. I have the Blu-ray put out by Vinegar Syndrome that might be out of print. But him in that film, he comes into the film in the third act, or very later on, I should say. And his performance in that film is surprisingly very tender and sweet. I mean, when he comes into the film, he's a very charming and I know I keep saying charming and charismatic, but he adds a real heart to the film that it totally threw me off guard. I mean, Flesh Pot on 42nd Street, which is a terrific film, by the way, and I recommend it. When he comes into the film, it adds a whole new layer, and where the film ends up with him, it's very interesting, and I don't want to give the ending of the film away, but when he leaves the film, it's just like, wow, okay, this performance could have been played by anybody, but it's something about him. He's got this really kind of likable quality that it really kind of excels the performance in a way. And, with people, I think when it came to a certain point, people thought that with Deep Throat getting as big as it did in the mainstream, that there'd be a crossover in a way where you would get actors who could have, who they thought were going to be in mainstream commercial films. And certainly a lot of them tried, I mean, like, I think probably, I'm going to sip my tea right here. Hold on. Funny cap mug. Very good tea, man. I think Tracy Lords is probably the one who tried, who was, I think, the most well known in terms of trying to get into mainstream films. But another great podcast, I would say, or another great show I would recommend that was made with Ashley from the Rialto Report was Once Upon a Time in the Valley. I remember I listened to that entire thing on my work shift once. There's a lot of parts that it's probably about a 6-hour story, but it's incredibly fascinating, and that Tracy Lords as well. That's whole conversation right there. She was an underage performer who was in adult films, and the whole fallout of that. But she was. They talk about how while she did go on to make work with mainstream filmmakers like John Waters. I mean, mainstream comparatively, so with John Waters, and she would end up in some other films. She never quite got that mainstream, like Hollywood kind of status that she wanted to, and I think a lot of actors have tried that. But what I'm saying before is that while you have actors like Robert Kerman, who would appear in like Cannibal Holocaust, or Fred Lincoln, who appeared in The Last House on the Left, also Wes Craven as well, who did a softcore film, directed a softcore film, it never, there was never that crossover appeal. But I think that people like Harry Reams and Jamie Gillis could have easily have been a mainstream actor, because they were so talented in that regard. Even somebody like the director Roger Watkins, who famously did Last House on Dead End Street. You watch his adult films, and he is a director who has such a unique vision, man. Corruption and Her Name Was Lisa are two films that were put out by Vinegar Syndrome. I believe Her Name Was Lisa is still in print. I'm not actually sure about that, but I know Corruption definitely is. But you watch those films, man, and which I believe he didn't direct the love scenes in Her Name Was Lisa. I don't think he directed them in Corruption either, but I might be wrong with that. But you watch those films, and what he is doing is so interesting. Her Name Was Lisa is a very mean-spirited reflection on somebody who is looking back on their life after their death, and a lot of the shots in the film are very specific. There's some great uses of the fisheye lens. It's very hypnotic, kind of upsetting quality, but it's a terrific film. And Corruption as well. The color palettes in that film. There's a whole great sequence towards the end when Jamie Gillis is going through these like doors and is peeping into these other people, and I think that was Jamie Gillis. It's been a little while since I've seen it. In that sequence, I should say. Obviously, he's the star of the film, but with that crossover appeal, I think it's interesting that it never happened, because I look now at actors who have done explicit work that have kind of made that crossover, who aren't pornographic actors. I look at like Chloe Sevigny, who had an unsimulated love scene in Vincent Gallo's The Brown Bunny, terrific film. And Chloe Sevigny's in. I mean, she's a big actor. Maybe not household name, but I mean, she's in a lot of films. Actually, ironically, it was in Lovelace as well, the film. And then you have I think who's the actor from Gaspar Noé's Love? Oh gosh, I don't know his name. It's Carl something, but he's been in. I just saw him in the film Watcher, and he was in like the Neon Demon and stuff. He has a lot of unsimulated sex in that film, and even like Leah Seydoux, who is in Bluest the Warmest Color, which contrary to popular belief is not unsimulated. It's very graphic, but it's not real. Who that film features explicit love scenes, but she was in The Last James Bond, she was in Midnight in Paris. I mean, I just saw her in Crimes of the Future. One of my favorite actors, and she's gonna be the new Emmanuelle, which is wild, man, and which I think is a great casting choice. I know some people were kind of iffy on that, but I think. But anyways, I'm completely off topic here, man. But my point is that if there was ever a crossover appeal, I look at actors like Harry Reams, man, and who could easily have made that, because he was such a unique and interesting guy, and listening to him in interviews, he's such a well-spoken guy. One of the documentaries that I would highly recommend, which I don't believe is even in print anymore on DVD, it's the documentary from 2005, Inside Deep Throat, that had interviews with Damiano and Harry Reams before they both passed away. Sorry about that. I had to pause briefly. I don't know if you heard the phone in the background or not. But anyways, I don't even remember what I was talking about before. In terms of breaking through that mainstream, it just never happened, man. I don't think it will happen at this point. I mean, the adult film industry now is so different than it was then. I'm not some expert or anything like that, but it's just interesting to see the evolution of it. It's just, I'm not even gonna get into that. That's a whole other conversation, man. Just why I'm just not as interested in the industry now, because I mean, with you had filmmakers who were trying to make films that had hardcore sex, and a lot of them, there's a good amount of films that weren't even. I mean, Her Name Is Lisa. I think it's such a downer of a film, man, that I can't even imagine getting off to that. I mean, there's some pretty gnarly scenes there. It's a pretty upsetting gang rape in that film that. I watched the film and like, this is a solid film on its own, man, regardless if you have the hardcore sex or not. I mean, now I just feel like I don't know. I don't see as many filmmakers going that route. I mean, I guess besides like, when you have filmmakers like Gaspar Noé who are not making pornographic films but are using unsimulated sex to tell a story, it's interesting. Or a film like Short Bus from 2005 or 6, I believe, which is also a very interesting film as well, that has unsimulated hardcore sex in the film. But it is just interesting to look back and see how much it's changed. I won't talk too much about Lovelace because I think I've seen the film once when it came out. I don't really remember a whole lot about it. I was listening to an interview with On the Realtor Report from the Eric Danville, who wrote the book about Lovelace, and Gerard Damiano's son, who talks about, which when you get a chance, check out that episode. It's very informative. But they talk about they were upset with the film because it was it incorrectly portrayed a lot of stuff. The stuff on set, the relationship with Linda, kind of making her out to be this sort of like, oh, she denounced it and that was it. Because, with Linda, I think she was such a complex and interesting person that I don't know if she ever truly, I mean, she eventually, I mean, she turned her back on the feminist groups as is, because as she says, she felt like she was used by them, and that's really what it feels like, is that she was used by, what she feels, she was used by the industry and then used by the feminist groups, the Gloria Steinem kinds of people, who basically used her to push this anti-porn kind of propaganda, who were saying, oh, the women on these sets, you know, they're being coerced and drugged and abused, and you know, in any industry, in the film industry, obviously, you know, there's people like that do these terrible things, but using her as a pawn to kind of like persuade in a way, like, okay, she was undoubtedly abused by Chuck Trainer, but pushing that in a way where it's like, oh, well, she was abused by the industry as well, and she was held at gunpoint and stuff and this and that, and even though maybe not literally held at gunpoint, but I think more figure of speech, she's somebody who was, I think, always coerced into doing stuff. I don't deny that a lot of her in the industry was a lot of her doing. I mean, they talk about how she was the instigator of a lot of stuff, and how she very much, kind of much like a Tracy Lords, who was talked about, oh, she was forced into doing this and that, but which I tell you, man, listen to that podcast, the Once Upon a Time in the Valley, but they talk about, you know, with Tracy Lords, how she very much was the instigator in a lot of that. She was very sexually aggressive, and later on when she pulled back and said that she was forced into a lot of it, I mean, it's just untrue. Everybody who was interviewed about her, it says that she very much was the instigator in a lot of it. And same thing with Linda, man. I mean, she liked doing it, and she was happy to do it, and then later on, when it all came kind of falling down, I don't blame her for taking a step back. I think, from what I can remember, the film kind of portraying it as that she became anti-porn, and then that was it. I mean, later on in her life, kind of not, I don't think, having a full grasp on the situation. I think that because she was abused by Chuck, and she has these feelings of being used as a whole, that kind of led her to being against. I mean, she, you know, and the stuff with Al Goldstein and stuff from I'm blanking on the name of the magazine. I don't know. She's very interesting, and for the film to portray it as one side of it, I think kind of does her a disservice, and does a lot of people involved a disservice as well. I from what I remember, I think they portrayed Damiano very incorrectly, and I haven't seen the film in a while, and maybe I'll go back and revisit it one day. But after listening to that podcast, it didn't really make me want to go back and watch it too soon. If it's like The Disaster Artist, man. It's like you if you want to watch it as a fictional film, then go for it. But I hope people aren't going to watch a film like The Disaster Artist as like a true story, because it's such a swayed and fictional account of what happened. But anyways, man, I've gone completely off topic. I'm talking in circles, man, and the episode is coming to an end. So next week, man, I'm going to start. I got one more week in me for the 1956 watches, so I'm going to have that up next weekend. Nice long weekend ahead, so I'll have that up. 4th of July next weekend, man. I can't wait for that, man. But anyways, that is all I have for this episode. I'm going to finish this tea, get this episode up, and I've got much to do today. Much productivity to be had. I hope you've all been productive. I hope you all have been well, watching good films, reading good works, educating yourself mentally, spiritually, all that good stuff. That's all I got, man. So appreciate you guys listening in. I don't even know what episode this is anymore, man. I think this is, 12 or 13? I don't know. But yeah, man, The Godfather and Deep Throat. 2 films that would change the course of cinema for 2 different reasons. It's very interesting to look at these 2 films. Anyways, man, I'll be talking in circles. So, yeah, that's all I got, man. All the best until next time.